I feel like when you and I first met, it helped me understand a certain thing about depression years later, which is to say you and I met in Los Angeles out at a show.
Yeah.
We our sensibilities meshed. This is probably 15 years ago. And you were like, let's stay in touch. And I was like, great, let's stay in touch. And then I tried to get in touch with you and you didn't get back to me. And I was just like, oh, I guess like, I mean, in my mind, I literally thought like, I guess Gary's just like a real operator. Like he's on to the next operation.
No.
But it's an assumption.
I remember thinking, even if I call him back, he was just trying to be nice. Oh my God. And what if I got that a young burgeoning comedian in his prime will feel like I was so insecure about my place in comedy, and it's completely unfounded, but it's depressive thinking. I auditioned for an episode of Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, wow.
And Larry David said, you're from Boston, why don't you have a Boston accent? I said, well, when I got to college, the kids would make fun of me. And he said, why don't you just make fun of them?
Oh my God, I love that. That's
and it's
amazing.
like, yeah, because I'm not
such a Larry name.
Because I'm not you, Larry.
Yeah.
And I haven't, I couldn't be myself like that at that point.
That.
Yeah.
Why don't you make fun of them?
Yeah.
I love
exactly.
that.
Immediately. And he didn't even have to think about it. And I had never even thought about making fun of them.
Why don't you turn it the other way?
Yes.
Right.
And had never considered it. I immediately just changed to placate them.
That's really interesting because I will say that like one of the things that bullies would make fun of me for growing up would be that I was a nerd, sort of a bookworm. And in hindsight, when I would go back at them and say, you're not smart, it wouldn't go well. Because
so
it's somehow more mean-spirited to say you're not smart than to say you're a nerd.
Yeah.
That feels like an unspoken truth.
Remember that movie Broadcast News?
One of my favorites of all time.
When they show Albert Brooks as a kid, telling those kids they'll never earn more than $16,000 a year.
And the guy goes, 16,000, sounds pretty good.
I mean, that is a brilliant
scene. I always look at Broadcast News when people ask me to describe my shows. I say, I aspire to make my shows like the movie Broadcast News, which is to say, it's funny in a way where you see yourself in it. Yeah. But ultimately, there's a larger story being told.
Yes, that mix of heaviness and the gut punch that you do so well. And very few others, especially comedians, are able to do that because it requires some vulnerability and also confidence to not be making jokes the entire time.
Well, it's funny because your book does that. I mean, and your special, The Great Depression, does that. And it's like my curiosity is, I know why I do what I do. Why do you do it? Why are you willing to give yourself to your audience like that?
I mean, part of it is that I experimented with it and it worked really well.
Like anything, right?
Yeah, and in that I started to open up about depression, and the more open and the more specific I got, the more when I did my meet and greets were people opening up to me and saying really thoughtful, kind things and being grateful, for which I was grateful on it. And so I was rewarded almost immediately. And also, I like talking about this with you, just the general mindset of comedians. But when we first start out, we're trying to get laughs. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And once we can do that, we want the other comedians to think we're good at this and to not. And we talked about this. We said it's not. They say it's not show friends, it's show business, but it's show friends.
Yeah.
And you're going to get more work if people think you're good at.
Oh my gosh, I'm laughing so
hard.
Yeah,
if people think you're good at this, so why not do jokes that not just the audience are laughing at, but your comedian friends are like, you know what? It may be hard to follow somebody who's killing, but it's better to follow somebody who's doing it in a way that seems fair. I remember this comedian, Frank Santarelli, saying he had this whole list of things, that little tricks you could do on stage, but if you did them, you couldn't come off the stage and say, "Oh, I killed."
Yeah.
Because you did the big one in the 90s when I first started was a stereotypically gay lispy voice, and it would kill with the audiences if you did that. But my friend Frank said, you can't say you killed if you did that. It's such a cheap trick.
Smart.
And yeah.
If you're doing a trope, it doesn't belong to you.
Right.
I said to somebody recently, a younger comic, who was doing like a kid voice from when they were kid. Don't do a kid voice. Don't do a kid voice.
Yeah. Do you
when you were a kid, and then they didn't, and it was a great adjustment
because it's specific.
Yeah. It's funny though, like your persona, and I feel like this is offstage too, is like you have like a confidence of like you're really good at this. You know what I mean? And you sometimes tell the audience, you're like, I'm very good at this.
You know, I mean, it's insecurity. That's
you think so?
Yeah, that's the source of that. Braggadocio and bravado.
But you're it's very funny the way you do it. It works really well.
It's funny because it disrupts the status quo of comedians being self-deprecating.
Right.
Yeah. So they're not used to that, and also it's at the point we are in our careers. It's also true. We know some truth. Yeah, we know what the heck we're doing, and also everybody is usually a little bit concerned at the beginning of a show with a comedian that they're not that familiar with, that the person is going to be uncomfortable or make them uncomfortable.
I certainly feel that whenever I watch a comedy show at all.
Yeah.
I'm concerned for the comedian every time.
Totally. It is so anxiety provoking. Yeah.
It's interesting, like,
and also setting myself at ease.
And setting yourself at ease.
Yeah.
Do you think of there being a hierarchy? Do you think I'm the best? Or do you think I'm top 10? I'm top 20?
I think after a cup of coffee, I would say there's 100 people as good as me.
Yeah.
And I can't name that many who are like better where I would be. There are certain people who I watch and I think, like Sade and my wife went to see Maria Bamford a couple weeks ago at Sony Hall. And most of us, you watch their act and you say, oh, I see how they got there. And that's a really good sentence. And I watch her and I think this is all inspired and I don't know how she comes up with this. The voice, it's magical and it's sublime and I'm in awe. So I think I'm excellent, but there are people who are better than me, and there are people who are better than me who haven't done it. There's so much luck and timing involved, and and I think we've discussed this, but Kurt Vonnegut's idea of he had survivor's guilt after surviving World War II, and then he said as a novelist he had survivor's guilt because he thought a lot of audiences have failed artists, painters, writers, actors, and he said comedians, which I thought was very generous. Yeah. And that's how I feel at this point. We can name a dozen comedians who we'd say, oh my gosh, this guy is so hilarious and should be a household name. I think Eddie Pepitone is very well known, but he should be as well known as fill in the blank of person who's selling out arenas.
I can cut this out if you don't say it publicly because I forget whether or not you have. I've seen you do this live, but I don't know if you've done anything. But you'll make jokes at the expense of like well-known people like Chappelle or Seinfeld.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Do you do that publicly, or do you just do that in clubs?
I mean, I mention it in theater shows. I mean, the thing is that Chappelle talks about how sensitive audiences are, and I point out that he's actually a very sensitive guy, just like all comedians.
Certainly.
And then the thing with Jerry Seinfeld is that I feel betrayed because I was such a fan, and I bought sign language. Yeah. And I remember reading it and being outraged. I said, "This is just his act."
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I felt taken.
I get that.
Yeah.
Have you ever talked to Seinfeld though? Because
no, I've never talked to him. I've never met him. I've never been in. I was at a party where he was across the way, and I didn't think it was my place to introduce myself, and nobody introduced me. But I do make jokes at his expense.
With Chappelle, you do the.
Oh yeah, I don't like it when he slaps his thigh with the microphone.
Thigh, yeah. It's funny, like I don't know about you, I field a lot of criticisms of Ricky Gervais, Jerry Seinfeld, Dave Chappelle, these moguls of comedy.
Yeah.
who have said things that people don't like over the years. And I always just play Switzerland with it. I just go, there's all kinds of comedy, and I like all kinds of comedy.
Yeah.
But I never...
See, I don't care for Switzerland. I think of all the times not to maintain neutrality, and don't they say if sometimes not taking a side is taking a side?
Who says that?
And this is actually a bit I was working on, but Toblerone had a picture of the Swiss Alps on the side of their box, and Switzerland sued them to take the Swiss Alps off their box. And I remember thinking, yeah, the Holocaust, they're not going to take a side. But the Toblerone,
that's a great joke.
Using the thing, I could never get it worded right.
That's so
and I
funny.
continue to try almost every time I go on stage. Yes.
Keep in the act.
Yeah,
I mean,
you
that's
keep
a
it in the
great
act
line.
just so somebody else doesn't take it.
Right.
Yeah.
Here's our red line. Chocolate.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Thank you.
Here's my red line.
That's perfect.
Chocolate. It's cubic chocolate.
But also, I just it'll turn into something that's also about Toblerone. Once I have a sentence that works, I'm hoarding anything associated with that thing. So I'll do something on the shape of it and the size of the boxes in the duty free.
Yeah. No,
like you need more luggage just to take the duty free size Toblerone or something funnier.
Yeah, I think that's a very funny joke. But yeah, I excuse me. I had a journey with this. I was early in my career. I was very critical of a couple of comedians, Jay Leno and Robin Williams,
because we feel betrayed because we love them and then they don't come through for us.
I think there's some truth to that. So like with Jay Leno, I used to do a joke on stage where I said, I like to tune into Jay Leno because I like to hear the jokes that I thought of too.
Oh, that's so good.
And it's funny, but at a certain point, a comedian said to me, like, he is one of us.
Right. No,
So
that's a great point.
And I was like, that's fair.
That's a great point.
And so I stopped doing it. I used to make a joke about Robin Williams because he's known as a joke thief. Oh. And he stole jokes, and he talked about it on Mark Maron years ago. And,
okay, yeah.
And it was a thing where he explained that, like, the way his brain works is whatever, he had to stop watching comedians at a certain point because everything goes in and then he flies up on stage and he freewheels and it comes out. Whatever comes out, comes out.
I remember hearing that.
I just remember doing a show with Robin Williams for the troops, for Wounded Soldiers, Wounded Warrior Project. And he talked to every soldier. These guys really
he was a beautiful
broken
person.
up, battered folks. And he would be the Robin Williams that they would dream of meeting to every single one of them. And I go, and it was such a reckoning for me because I'm like, I'm for that.
Yeah.
And I don't even care if you steal jokes.
No, I know.
Like, whatever you're doing, I'm for it.
No, totally.
And I became a complete convert on Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And I actually truthfully, I don't even really criticize any comic.
No, I
have a joke about Larry the Cable Guy years ago, but it's not even really that mean. It's just about having a catchphrase.
Yeah. I think what I feel comfortable talking about Seinfeld with is the difference in his lifestyle and my lifestyle, and that he has a building where he houses this Porsche collection, and I literally don't have enough room on my kitchen counter to keep the toaster on display at all times.
Oh my gosh.
We have to stow the toaster. So that's a joke from my
Well, he
last
should be
special.
contributing to the Gulman Fund.
The Human Fund. So good.
The Gulman Fund. I gave to the Gulman Fund earlier this month. I tried to do a monthly. I was just getting so many phone calls from those guys. At a certain point, I just go, put me down for a quarterly.
But I think what I said was that we're in the same business. He's worth $1 billion, and he's better than me. But is he $999,911,000 better than me?
Oh my gosh.
That was
Gary.
Which I feel is the most vulnerable I've ever been on stage. Announcing your net worth to a group of New Yorkers is, I was naked up there.
Okay, so you say in your book that you wrote this book in grade school called The Lonely Tree.
Oh yeah.
And
I have it. I still have it. I'm gonna post some pictures of it.
Did anyone flag that?
Nobody
in your life? as a metaphor for the mental state that you were experiencing.
Nobody flagged it. This was a tree that was being teased by the woodland creatures and cried so much that he grew to be really tall. And I was always the tallest kid in my class.
According to your book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so a tree
was being teased.
Yeah, I brought it home, and of course I didn't know that it was a cry for help, but my father loved it so much that he brought it to, and you may remember the name of this company, it was called Addison Wesley. And it was a publishing company that was on Route 128 in Reading. You could see it from the highway. And it turns out they published textbooks.
Yeah.
So he brought it to, I don't know who he brought it to. Maybe just a secretary or something. And they said, well, we publish textbooks, but this is a very nice book. They were very kind to my dad. But my dad didn't read anything into it. My mother didn't.
It's interesting. Like I was working on this joke recently about how my wife Jenny said to me, she goes, sometimes I feel like you're not happy. And I'm like, right. Like that was
that's some simple truth right there, which is like the greatest formula.
Yeah.
Right?
Like,
the simple truth. I don't mean in a disparaging way, formula, but the simple truth is killer. I mean, that's excellent.
Right. And I go, I wasn't happy when we met. I thought that's what you were into. And then we got married, and I was like, this is amazing. And I'm still not happy. And then we have
happiness
our daughter,
is a spectrum.
Yeah, but I'm still not happy. And go ahead.
No, I'm saying happiness is a spectrum, and I'm in the best angle of this spectrum right now. But I'm not 100% happy all the time, and I'm and we discussed this the last time we were together. The big worry is that this thing will cease or be curbed somehow. Which thing? Just where I am in my career. If we had this exchange where I said, if I could trade any future improvement in my lifestyle and my career, and all I had to give up was that improvement, and I could have exactly what I have now, which is a nice touring act, and I'm comfortable in terms of paying my bills, I would trade any upside for what I have now.
1,000% agree.
And
I could not agree with you more.
Yes, and I think so. My only worry is that something would come along where like when the pandemic hit, I thought, oh man, this could really be difficult to tour in the future if they don't find a solution for this.
Yes.
And so, but I have to play the percentages with that as well and say, well, there'll always be something, maybe a book or maybe making albums. We'll figure it out. That is one thing that I learned from writing this book, is that there were all these horrible things that happened to me throughout my life.
Yeah.
And I figured it out each time, and I keep forgetting that things that seemed daunting or impossible, from tying my shoes to dunking a basketball, I've figured it out.
Yeah.
And to remind yourself of that when something new comes up, something you're afraid of, is a really helpful strategy.
So that's a point that you make in your book, and I'm curious, is there anything right now in your life that feels daunting?
Wow. It's a great question. And my wife and I have been doing the things involved in freezing embryos. Mm-hmm. And so you know what this is like.
Yeah.
Can I be a good dad?
Yeah.
Will I live long enough to be a good dad? Because I'm older for having a child, and it's also around the same age my dad had me, and he was not as involved because my parents were divorced, but I just, because one of the things you can regret not having a great comedy career, not giving it your all as a comedian.
Yeah.
But it would be hard for me with my mindset to be able to live with regrets of not doing a good job as a father or husband. And I think this is a really interesting question for you, which is, I said this to Sade, I said, we've been playing marriage at the easiest level and you add a kid and it increases the level of difficulty, the degree of difficulty. And we're doing really well on this. We're killing it.
Yeah.
We're very happy people.
Yeah.
But what happens when you involve someone that's also going to reduce your amount of sleep and put you in a sleep deprived mood frequently? That's a different version of us. That's like what was your joke about the version of Mike that it was one drink Mike or
two drink Mike?
Two drink Mike, yeah,
comedy
right,
album, yeah,
yeah. So two drink Mike knew
loves
a
dancing,
card trick,
magic trick, yeah,
yes.
Zero drink Mike enjoys biographies,
yeah.
And something
so sleep deprived Gary and Sade are not the same person.
And you're right, and what I'll say in defense of becoming dad is your aperture really opens in this way. Or mine has, I should say, in this way that it's like it's you know I say the cliche in my special, the new one. People say you're going to see the world through baby's eyes. And
right.
And then you do.
Yeah.
And then you do.
Yeah.
And you go, oh man, the cliche is true.
Yeah. Yeah, and there should be another word besides cliche because there's so much negative baggage in terms of cliches, but some of them are really true.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like the Dalai Lama gets away with a lot of cliches. No, but I got served. Speaking of depression and unhappiness, I got served a video on TikTok where it was a clinician who was describing the difference between being unhappy and being depressed. Uh-huh. And the way he was putting it, and I'm simplifying this, but it's like he was describing depression as the experience of almost like sand coming through a funnel, but it's too much sand.
Okay.
And so in other words, there's too many things to handle, and there's just a stoppage, and that's why people can't leave their house, can't get out of bed, just because there's a stoppage. And unhappiness is in relation to, or the way he was describing it, in relation to feeling like discontent with things as they are in your life. And when I heard that, I just thought, yeah, both. Both, right? And then I was like, but then also, aren't we all a little of both?
Yeah.
And we're not all clinically depressed.
Right. I think this reminds me of something. I just read this recently. And I must have been reading it recently again because I remember reading this book a long time ago while David Foster Wallace was alive. But it's called Brief Interviews with Hideous Men. And it's a group of short stories, a collection of short stories. And there's one called The Depressed Person. And it's extraordinary. And one of the things is, I don't know what this is called grammatically, but he doesn't say they in terms of the depressed person. He says the depressed person in every sentence that the depressed person comes up. So he says the depressed person, and one of the main things the depressed person, and this depressed person had a lot of things going on, but one of the main things, and I was trying to get this across in the Great Depression, and when I read William Styron's Darkness Visible, which is a great account of a depression, they talk about the limitations. Styron in particular talks about the limitations of the English language in terms of describing what a depression is, and that the word depression is so small for what this is, and it also happens to intersect with the idea of I'm depressed because the Celtics lost in the Eastern Conference Finals, okay? So there's that, but also there's this frustration that in the depressed person talks about being so frustrated, maddeningly in the British sense of the term maddeningly, like insanity, the frustration involved in not being able to describe to people who are not depressed, who do not have clinical depression, what that feels like. Yeah. And it's so many things, and that is a really difficult thing unless you're a professional or you've experienced it. It is so hard to describe. So you can give symptoms, and you can give stories of how little you accomplished or how difficult something was, but it's so hard to describe. And I think that really hit me to the point where I'm feeling great, but I welled up and cried when he was talking about this, because I've been there and I've been the depressed person. Yeah. And it was just, it really, and also you're reading it years after David Foster Wallace committed suicide. Yeah. So it's obvious that he understood it like very few have, but also had this ability to describe it in great detail.
I feel like when you and I first met, it helped me understand a certain thing about it years later, which is to say you and I met in Los Angeles out at a show.
Yeah.
We our sensibilities meshed. This is
Totally.
probably 15 years ago. And you were like, let's stay in touch. And I was like, great, let's stay in touch. And then I tried to get in touch with you and you didn't get back to me. And I was just like, oh, I guess in my mind, I literally thought I guess Gary's just like a real operator. Like he's on to the next operation.
No.
But it's an assumption.
Yeah.
And years later, I find out you had these bouts of depression where you couldn't get out of bed, you couldn't leave your apartment. So there's so much going on. And it taught me this wider lesson, which is you cannot know what someone is experiencing. So it's so unfair to assume what their experience is of that.
No,
it was a huge lesson for me.
No, it is really a good thing to learn, and I could probably apply it to my criticism of famous comedians, but I think, and one aspect that I don't think we covered, and maybe you hadn't said that you thought our sensibilities matched. I remember thinking, even if I call him back, he was just trying to be nice, and what have I got that a young burgeoning comedian in his prime will feel like I was so insecure about my place in comedy, and it's possible that you thought I was a really good comedian and wanted to be friends besides that. And here's the other thing. Would it have been so bad if I was a terrible comedian and you still wanted to be friends?
Yeah.
Like, that's the whole thing, that I couldn't imagine anybody liking me other than that I was a really good comedian. And if I'm not a really good comedian, then they wouldn't want to spend
what value
any
would
time.
I have
Yeah, what value
anyway?
would I have? And it's just so it's sad, and yet it seemed so reasonable and was going on in my mind with just about everyone. So there were people in addition to you that I wouldn't say I was dodging them. I would just not get back to them and then start to feel so guilty about not getting back to them. And they'll think that I'm a jerk when I do get back to them. And there's also this thing of being afraid that somebody will tell me off.
Oh.
Yeah. If I do get back to them, like, who do you think you are that you can just take your time in getting back to me? And I called you 2 weeks ago, and it's completely unfounded, but it's depressive thinking.
Yeah. When you were in the depths of your depression, what could a good friend have done? Because I have a lot of friends who have substance abuse issues, depression, and a lot of times I'm at a loss for what I can do to be helpful.
I remember one of the nicest thing, and again, this is name dropping, and I don't know how she knew how sick I was, but Amy Schumer called me, said, let's go for a walk. We walked through the Central Park on our way to an appointment, and it was long walks with people that would get me out of my head, or in some cases just watching a movie silently with a friend, going to the movies. Just getting me out of the house was so helpful. And I'd go home and I would frequently say late at night, if I felt like this, I would have a life.
Yeah.
And then in the morning it resets. It's called diurnal variation, where you feel a little bit better at the end of the day, especially if you've gotten out of the house. So I used to go to a mood disorder support group it was on the campus of Columbia University, and there were a lot of trains to switch and buses, and as arduous as it was really helpful to get me moving. So and then I'd be with people who understood what I was talking about, and I remained friends with a few people from there, and one of them was telling me, he said, you would just sit there and listen, and it was heartbreaking. And I wanted
at the support group.
Yeah, and I wanted to say, that was the best part of my day. If I was there, I was really succeeding in fighting back, and it was immensely helpful.
Wow. I don't even want to go down that rabbit hole. I was going to...
No, I'm open to rabbit holes.
Well, it's like, I've struggled with this thing in the last few years where I've had depressed friends who just drop out.
Yeah.
I've tried to be helpful. And then at a certain point, they're just gone.
Oh.
And so then you just go like, well, where's the line?
Right.
Where's the line between, no, actually, this person might be a bad friend. Right?
Oh, that's interesting.
And it's a rabbit hole. I don't know that there is an answer to that.
No, that's a great point. I mean, recently I've taken a look at my friendships and done a little Marie Kondo decluttering.
Yeah.
And found, well, this person hardly ever initiates. I have to set up every meal. I'm going to let them do it. And in some cases they do. And in some cases they don't. And I just think, and my therapist was really good at this. He says, you can still have them in your life, but you do not have to expect anything more than what you're getting, and know what you're in when you go into it, and know that if you meet up with so-and-so, they're only going to talk about their job, and you're not going to get a word in edgewise. And if you want to do that, that's fine. But know that you're making that choice. And I thought that was really helpful.
That's fascinating. This is kind of, I've never asked this question before on the show, but when Tom Papa was on, we had kind of a come to Jesus about our friendship, and it was actually really helpful in like a real life way. What is our relationship? Are we friends or are we work friends?
Oh, I think my feeling is always that this is a really busy guy, and I'll bet you that he wouldn't be able to fit me in. Yeah.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. So I don't like, because there are a lot of things that I will think, oh, I bet you Mike would think this is funny. And I'm just like, don't be the guy who's sending, because we all have friends who send us things. And we're just like, I don't have time for this because if some friends, if they send you something and you react, then your next hour is in getting text back and forth. And I just, especially while writing a book,
right,
you don't have time for that.
Right. Attachments to links, the things you don't have a login for.
I feel like
it's like,
sometimes,
you know what? I don't have a Wall Street Journal subscription. I don't think I'm gonna have one.
Yeah. I don't know that Kafka meant this when he wrote everything he wrote, but there is something about the Wall Street Journal paywall that I think he would have related to.
I think so too. And I think so that's a fascinating well, let me just say here on the record, this line is open. I always want to hear from you.
Okay, good. That's really nice to hear.
I'm always happy to hear from you. I don't know. It's interesting because you and I have now known each other for so long.
Yeah.
And I feel like we're in a unique position in our friendship where we could actually theoretically point out things about each other that we could try in our act that maybe we don't even realize about ourselves maybe is funny.
Oh, that's really interesting. It's funny because very few friends ask each other what level of friendship they are.
Yep.
And that's I won't lie. It's not a comfortable position to be asked that question. It's very vulnerable to ask that question, and also on the other end, it's almost, I have to give an account of what happens with us when we're not in the same room, because we were on that documentary together.
Did a documentary together.
And I was so grateful that you were there, because I didn't know anybody as well as I knew you. And it was a great life raft, and we had so many great laughs, and then you were gone. And it reminds me of when I graduated from college. I had this close friend all through second semester, senior year. His roommate had gotten a girlfriend, so he was very lonely, I think. And I had just broken up with a girlfriend, so I was very lonely, and we connected, and then school stopped. And I remember thinking, well, unless he reaches out, I'll probably never see that guy again. Yeah. And he reached out, and we spent the next, it's now coming up on 35 years, talking on every other day, weekly basis.
Wow.
And I could see a scenario where that friendship never took because I was afraid that he would be put off by me reaching out right away after. And he called me like the first day of summer vacation. It was just, it's an insecurity that I should have put behind me 35 years ago with that piece of evidence, what I would have lost out on, one of my closest friends.
I'm going to have to call you tomorrow. So this is called the slow round, and we did this last time you were on the show. And one of the reasons that we were in a rush to do this again is that the first episode that you were on, and people should go back and listen to it, is one of our most popular episodes of all time.
Oh, really?
We've re-aired, and in it, we had the slow round, and you said, oh, you should get Anne Lamott's book, Bird by Bird, which I do have, and I recommend all the time. I followed her on Instagram. She did not follow me back.
Oh, isn't that heartbreaking?
Killed me. Anne Lamott, come on. I talk you up. I plug your book all the time. Are you just so massive?
I know.
But anyway, there's a thing that
so
we now mention from Bird by Bird as a writing prompt often, and I'll ask you, which is, do you have a school lunch that you remember from your childhood?
Oh, wow. I do remember that one day my mom sent me with a full Italian sub to school.
Nice.
from a sub shop.
Oh,
and because I was used to her always putting...
You had me at Italian sub.
Yeah, putting sometimes just a jelly sandwich, sometimes just a jelly and fluff sandwich if we were out of peanut butter.
Yeah.
I, without looking into my bag, traded it for marshmallow fluff, which is peanut butter and fluff, marshmallow fluff, fluffernutter.
Yeah, fluffernutter.
From Boston. And I got a fluffernutter, and I traded this kid unopened my bag, which I thought was just, at best, a peanut butter and jelly.
Right, you had a restaurant quality lunch. And this
I had a
guy,
restaurant quality.
yes.
And then I told my mother that night, and she was outraged.
That's fascinating.
And the great thing with my mother, as I point out in the book, is that she can never let anything go. The statute of limitations with her, she still asks me if I ever use the Nintendo that I begged for when I was in high school, by the way.
Yeah. What's the best and worst nickname you've ever received in your life?
In college, there was a football player, and he was really good, man. His name was John Stolberg, but not Jewish, as you'll see in what he nicknamed me. And I almost thought it was sort of like Bathos, because he was not a bright guy, but he came up with the perfect nickname for a Jewish person on a college Catholic school football team, which was, he referred to me as Gefilte.
Oh, Gefilte. But what does that have to do with you, really?
Nothing, except that it's a very specific kosher food. Oh my God. Gefilte fish.
That feels anti-Semitic if he weren't Jewish.
Oh, it was so, yeah.
But it still can be.
He wasn't Jewish. It was, it was definitely, it was. He just had a last name that sounded almost Jewish.
Oh, sounded
but
Jewish.
But it was anti-Semitic, but it was kind of clever.
It's not clever. This is Stockholm syndrome.
It was off the beaten path?
No.
No? Okay.
Gary,
Stockholm
you've been
syndrome.
bullied with anti-Semitism. It's time you come to grips with it, and that's the level of friendship we're at. We've come a long way in 10 minutes.
Oh, that's really good. I appreciate that.
By the way, that's a good joke premise. The guy calling you gefilte when you're a kid and you're realizing as a grown-up that it's anti-Semitism.
Oh, yeah.
And all these years you'd covered for him.
Yes.
I thought it was clever.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not clever. It's not clever. It's anti-Semitic and he's a bully.
Oh, he was a bully though.
I think that's probably worth trying on stage, because I feel like with your delivery and the way in the way that you word stories,
interesting.
I think that has a really good potential to be a joke. Which is, by the way, what these slow round questions are intended for, is to yield jokes long term.
Right.
Is there a song that makes you cry?
Oh my gosh. So many. And most recently, while on stage describing how I had just listened to this song, I started crying while on stage. Bette Midler's The Rose. Oh. Holy mackerel.
What is it about the song?
Just the idea, because I'm big into metaphors and the poetry of winter versus spring, summer, the way that's used so frequently. So I have on my wrist this bracelet which says, "In the depth of winter, I finally found that within me lay eternal, an invincible summer." And it's Albert Camus, and there's something about beneath the hard frozen snow of winter, there was this seed of a rose that bloomed, and it was about love, and it really hit me, because the one thing that you don't know when you're in the middle of a depression is that you may come out of it, and the belief that you'll come out of it can be very helpful, and that's what that hopefulness of that song really hit me and really resonated with me.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Wow.
But I cry a lot with Eddie Vedder, that song about the elderly woman at the she's a cashier, and a man from her past comes in and she doesn't say anything to him. And I think the name of the song is so long intentionally, but it's like I think it's called "Elderly Woman Behind the Register" it's off of Verses, I think. Wow. But I'd heard it a million times, but I never knew the lyrics. And when I looked at the lyrics, and also an interview with Eddie Vedder, and he talked about the motivation and the origin of the song, that this woman was elderly, obviously, and this person who had been in her life a really long time ago was coming back, but didn't remember or didn't know her. And it was songs about loneliness really get me, man.
I get you.
Yeah,
loneliness, I think, is the thing that so much of great art is about.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's people. It's like we're all trying to express what our version of loneliness is. And so if you can connect the way that song is connecting with you, then you're opening people up, and it's just a gift.
Yeah. I mean, just the fight against loneliness by people who feel that they're more comfortable alone, a lot of us.
Yeah.
And we're not more comfortable alone.
Yeah.
Really, we're social people, but
yes.
there's all this anxiety and second guessing and insecurity, and a lot of times we're too afraid of the connection, because then you feel, and that's uncomfortable too.
Do you have any new material that's sort of half premise, half anything that you're working on that you want to throw into the mix?
Can I grab the notebook?
Yeah, you can grab a notebook, yeah.
All right, so...
Can you hold that up so people can see it a little bit, or are you self-conscious?
Where's my tree?
Of the camera, right here, right here. I mean, that's nice.
Oh, thank you.
I like that I can just see the word ignored in all caps.
Yeah, because I think there's a better word for this. So I talk about finding out when I was in third grade, I think, that Jesus was Jewish.
Yes.
And so I wanted to write this sentence where I said, what great news that Jesus, the focal point of Christmas, this holiday, but I should say Christmas, the focal point of Christmas was, and the word, I don't think it's the right word, was as ignored by Santa as I was.
Yeah. I love that. So you're saying, so the fundamental punchline of the joke is that really, to use the phrasing from Broadcast News, the movie we were referencing earlier, they're really burying the lead.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
In the sense of, that Jesus was Jewish, and at that devout.
Yeah,
he was a very serious Jewish person.
A zealot, according to the book Zealot by Reza Aslan. But I said, Hebrew school never mentioned Jesus. They bring up Jonas Salk, Hank Greenberg, Sandy Koufax, Kirk Douglas, and Houdini, but ignored the greatest magician of them all.
That's a winner.
All right. Then I will put a star next to that one.
The greatest magician of them all is so good.
Oh, thank you.
Because it acknowledges Christianity as a significant thing, but then it also undercuts it at the end. I wonder, this would be like an Ira Glass note, but it's like, how is that joke about you?
Right.
And like, are you ignored? Do you feel ignored? How do you feel about what's happening in the joke?
That's really good. That's a good Ira Glass note. Yeah.
That's what he always says. It's like plot and then how you feel about it, and then plot and then how you feel about it. But man, is that funny? I think that's funny as hell.
Yeah. I mean, part of it is that I have this thing where Jews are so proud of anybody that does something, but then they're very particular about their pride in certain areas. They don't take pride in Jesus, and they don't take great pride in at least within the world of Curb Your Enthusiasm, which I really identify with for some reason.
Yeah.
They don't really embrace Larry. As successful as he was.
Yeah.
They don't care for
You think
Larry.
Jewish people don't like Larry David?
Within the world, the universe of
Larry
Curb Your
David.
Enthusiasm.
Okay.
The people, the Jews in general love
Larry
David.
But in
the people
Curb
in
the
his
show
world
can't stand him.
And here's the thing. I kind of identify with that in that I feel like a lot of my people who come to my shows are much kinder to me than my family is about my shows. Like my family is just so famous. I don't know if you get this from family and even close friends. They just damn with faint praise.
Oh, yeah.
It's just
all day.
Yeah, and it's
congratulations.
Yep.
Let's go over faint praise. Here's what you don't say to people who just performed their goddamn heart out on the stage. You don't say, congratulations. How did you feel about it?
Oh my gosh, the Barry Katz School.
Oh.
How do you think it went?
Oh. Any other ones can you think of?
You looked great.
Yeah. The set is gorgeous. Do you get nervous?
Do you get nervous? How do you remember it all?
How do you remember all the words?
Yeah.
Don't say these things.
No.
Don't say these things to a performer after they've just performed their soul to you. Just don't.
Yeah.
You know what? Lie. I don't care about your integrity. You just saw someone perform.
Totally.
Don't, your word is impeccable. Sure, maybe tomorrow it is, but not when you just saw the person perform. You go, I loved it. We loved it. Here's my favorite part. You pick one sentence.
Towards the end of my sets, I usually say, listen, I don't know what your threshold is for a standing ovation, but I know there are some people who have standing ovation integrity and you have to cry at some point, but I gave you a much longer show than you paid for.
That's so funny.
And you have to stand up to leave anyhow.
Yes.
But I wanted to run one last thing because it was on the idea of a husband and wife, and I talk about the expression "it was a different time."
Yes.
And I say during all these so-called different times, there were people doing the right thing.
That's right.
And during World War II, there were German and Polish people hiding Jews. But I wanted to add this thing where I say, but there are also men not hiding Jews and blaming it on their wives. I'd love to hide you. My wife she brought up the dairy restrictions.
Oh my God, that's
and
so funny.
I is it in poor taste?
I don't think it's in poor taste.
I would find it in poor taste if it was a non-Jewish person, but also I feel like as a Jewish person, where's the...
I think you're onto something massive, though. It was a different time thing. Is that in the special that you're developing right now, like your next comedy special?
Yeah, it's about how my father was a progressive member of the quote-unquote greatest generation, whereas most of them were not. And people will say, well, he was a very racist man, but he served in World War II, and it was a different time. And I always say, this time, it must have been before the famous schism between right and wrong. when they split over creative differences, but that was my father wasn't a perfect parent, but he was a good person who was progressive in terms of he never said anything homophobic or racist or sexist, misogynistic. He was very progressive in his politics and his social views, and I just it's rare for white men of that era. Not rare, but but uncommon.
No, I think that'll joke will work. It helps me to see the context of it, the ramp into it.
Right.
Because I think that the energy of that premise will roll into I think the blaming their wives becomes like if this, what else?
Yeah. Right.
And then I think it might be beneficial to do an if this, what else for four other things.
Yes.
Like who else was blamed? Who else did a thing that was on the line? But ultimately, if they blame their wife, but ultimately wasn't helpful. Like other examples of people who weren't helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's no, I think that's great though.
Thank you.
So the final thing we do on the show is working it out for a cause. And is there an organization you contribute to that we will contribute to?
I contribute monthly to the Helen Keller Foundation, but it's part of this thing that I discovered from Peter Singer's book, Doing the Most Good. Have you ever read that? It's sort of a 100 pages on effective altruism.
Okay.
And Sammy Koppelman put me on to it.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. And so there's a website called givewell.org, and it's the most intense and analytically driven idea of what is doing the most good, it seems, in terms of your money saving the most lives is how they figured it out. So they said that with $5,000 contribution, you're saving one life by contributing to either this group that puts up nets, malaria nets in Africa, and in the case of the Helen Keller Foundation, I think they give vitamin A to kids so that they don't go blind or die.
Wow.
So I contribute every month to the Helen Keller Foundation. But we could also do givewell.org at the general fund where they put it to the best use.
Yeah, why don't we do givewell.org?
Yeah,
because
it gives people a lot of choices there.
People can learn about the Helen Keller Foundation and all the other ones.
Yes.
No, I think it's beautiful. And it's and I think you're beautiful. and I'm glad that we had this talk because I think it's going to augment a stronger friendship. I'm going to text you tomorrow. I'm going to do a follow-up. I think we can take our friendship to the next level, and also even our joke collaborations, because I have a lot more jokes here that we didn't even get to, and so do you. And I think we could be regularly bouncing jokes off one another.
I would love that.